Hey Wild, Lauren Wild, the Church Witch here. We are going to talk about Mercury retrograde in Scorpio. So today is September 30th. I'm sorry. Look, Mercury retrograde is already kicking in. It's October 30th. And we are in Scorpio season. The sun is 7 degrees into Scorpio season, and really starting to feel Scorpio energy. Currently right now we have a stellium of energy in Scorpio, meaning that there are 3 or more planets in one sign at the same time. So for example, the sun, which wherever the sun is, it illuminates, it shines a light on, and it magnifies the specific energy that is being filtered through the sign and projected onto 3D consciousness, 5D consciousness, earth plane, okay? So what we're talking about is transpersonal astrology or psychology, right? So we're talking about essentially the energy that we're feeling is being filtered in through the planets and to our own planetary cosmic bodies. I know, it's a little out there, but you know what? It kind of makes sense. So hear me out. So basically what we're talking about here is the sun filtering scorpionic energy. So Scorpio is all about power. It's all about transformation, sex, secrets. It wants to know. It's very soul driven. It's shadow work. It is the master alchemist, especially emotional alchemist, right? So alchemy is essentially the process of taking what was once dark and then transmuting it or transforming it to light. A good Christian scripture for that would be like from ashes came beauty. It's the concept of blending 2 elements to create a new element, which is also third way magic. And so, what we're looking at is a time period where, in general, just Sun and Scorpio, we're being asked to let something die and be transformed, right? So we're letting something go. Now, Mercury is all about communication. So knowing what your natal Mercury is very helpful in general, because knowing what energy your natal Mercury holds tells you a lot about your communication style and how you tend to perceive the world around you. Okay, so Mercury rules the mind. It's the air element. And so when you have, so for example, I have a Libra Mercury. This is why I'm like, talk all the time. How can I connect? I feel like a friend, right? Like I'm very communicative. It also helps my channel a lot. So for people that have air element Mercury, so that would mean that your Mercury is either in Aquarius, Gemini, or Libra, then that means that you're more communication driven, okay? In the way that you communicate and the way that you think and perceive the world around you. Now, if you have a water Mercury, which would be Pisces, Cancer, Scorpio, then you would be more internal and intuitive, right? So it'd be more knowing, more sensing, more sentient in forms of communication. So a Mercury in Scorpio is like the detective. It's probing, it's sensual in nature. And I don't mean that sexually, although there is definitely the sexuality there piece. But this is more about like just needing to probe the depths and understand why, okay? And if you have a fire Mercury, which is Aries, sorry, I was forgetting right now, Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius, then you're passionate. You're a passionate communicator. Like, it's like you are quick to anger and like have an angry response, or like a driven, creative, like impassioned response, right? And then if you are an Earth Mercury, which would be Taurus and Virgo, Capricorn, there's more of a grounded practicality to you, okay? So you might be slower, to your response. Like there's this deep sense of groundedness in the way that you communicate. You can also be really stubborn in the way that you perceive the world around you. Not very capable. Taurus is a fixed sign, like we're talking like very like once it makes its mind up, it's made its mind up kind of energy. So knowing those elements in terms of your own Mercury, when we filter Mercury through the lens of Scorpio, we're talking about depth, knowing, and a deep sense of introversion, right? So Scorpio is typically like the detective, the psychotherapist, the psychologist, like it wants to probe, it wants to know everything, and it always wants to go deeper. But in the way that it functions, it's actually deeply introverted. It's very secretive. And it may want to know everything about you, and you could sit with a Scorpio and they'll know everything about you, but then you walk away and you realize like you don't know very much about them. And they put you in a seat where they got you to pull all of you out, and you left and you're like, how'd they do that? Right? So we're talking about Mercury and Scorpio, which we've been experiencing for the last month. Okay. But then when it goes retrograde, so it's stationed on the 11th of October, so 2 weeks ago, started to give us a little bit of a theme of what was going on. This is when we were in the 2-week shadow period that Mercury stationed, so it stopped. And so when I talk to people about Mercury retrograde, essentially what I like to think of Mercury retrograde is this. So imagine yourself like walking on the streets. I was walking with my friend Heidi when I was in Seattle this summer, and we were walking the streets, and this dump truck was just flying by, and it flew by us. And it was like, wow, that was fast. And then about 3 seconds later, then the wind from how fast that big moving object was finally caught up to us, and it blew us off guard. And we were like, whoa, our hair went up, and it was like a mess. And we felt very like off guard. The same thing happens with a planet. So for example, Earth is moving thousands of miles an hour. We can't feel it because we're so used to it, right? It's our center of gravity. Mercury moves even faster. So when that planet that stops comes to a halt, we feel the after effects of that energy just blow past us, and it pushes our hair up, and maybe our skirt flies up, and we feel like kind of like, what just happened to me? And so, hold on one second. My phone is actually going off. Okay. So what happens though is that, we start to feel a little off our game. And so wherever Mercury is for you in your chart natally is where you might feel a little off your game, and you might have to slow down. And wherever Mercury is for you natally will tell you a lot about where you might start to pull in and become more internal and have this inner dialogue of deep depth seeking. Okay, now in terms of what the theme is going to be overall, Mercury stations at 27 degrees tomorrow on Samhain, which is Halloween and the Witches' New Year. It's the pagan holiday of the Witches' New Year. And so it's really interesting because it conjuncted Venus today in Scorpio, and Venus rules love and relationships and partnerships and finances and self-worth and value. Okay, so it is highlighting a specific thread that we're going to carry for the next 6 weeks. So Mercury stations retrograde tomorrow, and then it stations to go direct on November 20th. Now, we're not fully out of the shadow period until December 7th. So in terms of, what we should be prepared for, Mercury retrograde in Scorpio is not super electronics driven. This has been the year that Mercury retrograde has happened in water signs. This is more about our emotions. This is more about the universe trying to help provoke us into really gaining a connection to our sense of intuition and knowing and depth and soul, right? So, in the beginning of the year in April, we had one in Pisces, then we had one during eclipse season in July in Cancer, and that was crazy. And now we have the final Mercury retrograde for 2019, and it is in Scorpio. So all 3 water signs, water is the feminine. It is your intuition, it's your emotions, right? So what we're looking at is a deep dive into how to trust ourselves and our emotions. It's very, very, very specific to the divine feminine. Okay, so in terms of where that energy is going to hit you the most, I created a graphic that you can check out below, and you'll see that. And then on the next video, for my Wild Beloved tier, I'm going to do a pretty quick reading of like how that energy is going to hit you, and like a couple of cards for each rising sign. So you can join that at patreon.com/Lauren Wild. Otherwise, I hope that you get a lot out of this in terms of some sense of like how to prepare. I am a lover of all things witchy, so crystals are part of that, okay? One of the main ones that I'm going to recommend is going to be hematite. So hematite is naturally, it pushes away electronic energy, like the EMF, and then it's also very grounding. So you want a lot of grounding stones. Another one would be tourmaline. So tourmaline is psychic protection. Another one would be bronzite. So this is a bronzite pyramid, and bronzite has this really cool energy where it does naturally what a return to sender spell does. When you wear this, people naturally have what they do reflected back to them so that they become aware of it, of their own energy and their own behaviors without you having to like really like, you know, be super aggressive about stating your boundaries, which no matter what, we're all going to have to be aggressive about stating our boundaries. Scorpio season is, no matter what, a time where we introvert. And second of all, like when we've got Mercury stationing retrograde, the idea of being passive aggressive about your needs is not going to work. Scorpio won't have that. Scorpio is direct. And also it causes confusion. It causes miscommunications to try to be nice when really what you need to just say is like, hey, I'm feeling this energy pretty strongly and I'm going to kind of like shut down for the next couple of weeks, right? Like I'll see you in the beginning of December, right? Like it's this more internal space. Scorpio functions really well with like 5 friends. It doesn't need a million friends. It just needs like 5 super loyal friends that it knows that it can call, even though you haven't heard from a Scorpio in 2 months. That Scorpio, you know, like you can call and they'll be like, what's up, dude? And they might ask you like, and what's under that? And what's under that? And what's under that? Right? Like that's what Scorpio does. Scorpio asks you a question, and once you answer it, they're like, and what's under that? And then you answer that question, and they go, and what's under that? And then you answer your question, and they go, and what's under that? This is the nature of Scorpio, and this is what, you know, that energy is going to be, that probing, depth-seeking, plutonic energy that is going to try to pull you out of your fear, out of your shadow, out of your lower self, and bring you into your power, okay? You know, in terms of just some safety precautions, yeah, go ahead and back up your laptop, back up your computer. Scorpio retrograde in a water sign is not so much electronics driven, it's communication and emotion driven. You know, you just really want to be clear in your intentions and what you say. Emotions could get miscommunicated very quickly. People can get hurt really fast. And, you know, you might feel like a sense of betrayal, you know, because Scorpio is deeply afraid of being betrayed. So, you know, we're looking at jealousy, we're looking at secrecy, and we're looking at like heightened emotion, like a lot of emotional intensity, a lot of depth and need. And like, because what happens with Scorpio is the scorpion, and it has this armored shell and a stinger, and it knows how to armor up and be in its power very quickly, right? Like I am a Scorpio rising, I am that. However, underneath that hard exterior shell, that exoskeleton, inside a Scorpio is deeply mushy, right? Like it's literally mush. And so Scorpio's power is found in vulnerability. So this is about pushing past your fears and being vulnerable. This is about saying, hey, I might get really hurt. I might be betrayed. And I need to do this anyways, because this is where my power is within vulnerability. So all of that being said, like I said, wherever your rising sign is going to tell you where this energy is going to go down the most. And then, you know, Mercury retrograde is not a time where you start new things. You use Mercury retrograde energy to reflect, to renew, to slow down, to rethink, you know, to really like mull over your decisions, because shortly after Mercury stations completely clear and free on December 7th, Jupiter is going to move into Capricorn, and Capricorn is all things work and like profession. And so it's going to be balls to the wall come December. We're going to feel this big push, like move, you know, and then a couple of weeks after that, we're going to get into the final lunar eclipse of this specific energy that we're working with the Capricorn confluence. And so like right now, what we're doing is this big final purge, like what's going to collapse, what needs to die, and what needs to be rebirthed, so that when we get to the new year, we have space to let the new thing be born. Right now, there's no space, right? Like right now, we're clearing the karma, we're clearing it, we're purging it, and Scorpio is the perfect energy to do that. So hopefully this has been helpful to you. Make sure you check out my Instagram and my Patreon, because you'll see a lot more stuff on there. My Instagram is the Church Witch, and my Patreon is /Lauren Wild, and you can get in on all the details, and I'll be sharing about Mercury retrograde pretty sporadically, like over the next month. So I'll talk to you guys later. Have a great day and happy Samhain.